"What are you doing with my son?" The voice exploded behind her like a thunderclap. Sharp and cold, just like the storm pounding against the glass dome of the mall. Savannah froze, still holding the crumpled napkin scribbled with a little bear. The boy in her arms, shivering, suddenly went stiff. Savannah Grant hadn't planned on being anyone's hero that day. She was just trying to outrun a thunderstorm that had rolled in faster than the forecast said it would, one hand gripping her art supply bag, the other shielding her head with a sketchbook. Wind whipped through the mall's main atrium like it was trying to slap her in the face. "Feels like one of those stormy lunch hour kind of days," she muttered, not even bothering to find herself funny. She had just stepped into the coffee shop on the ground floor, about to order an iced drip, when she spotted the boy. Tiny, messy brown hair, cheeks pink from the cold. He was standing alone in front of the information desk, clutching a dinosaur backpack, eyes wide and lost like he'd landed on the wrong planet. Savannah froze. The kid wasn't crying, but it was the silence that made her uneasy. She walked over and gently crouched down to his level. "You okay, buddy?" Big eyes looked up, brimming with tears, a small nod that didn't convince her. "Where's your dad?" "He was right behind me. Then he disappeared." The boy's voice was as soft as the rain outside. "I don't know which way to go." Savannah hesitated, glanced around. No one looked like they were missing a kid. She pulled a napkin and a pen out of her bag and started drawing, a little bear hugging a donut almost as big as itself. She'd never been great at talking to kids, but drawing, that was her language. The boy giggled. "Why is the bear so fat?" "Because that bear looks like me at breakfast," she said, and they both laughed. Less than 5 minutes later, a large shadow fell over them. "What are you doing with my son?" Savannah looked up, heart clenching. In front of her stood a tall man in a dark suit, dress shirt slightly wrinkled from the rain, his voice sharp as a blade. He was gripping his phone tightly, his face so tense it looked like it might explode. She jumped to her feet. "Wait, I was just... Where were you taking him? Was he crying?" "No, I wasn't." The boy grabbed her hand, frightened. "Dad!" She didn't do anything. She just drew a bear. "You trying to lure my son with drawings?" Savannah's throat tightened. He looked lost. The man reached to pull the boy back, but the kid resisted. "Dad, she's like Mom." Everything stopped. The air, the rain, even the sound of the escalator sliding past. For the first time, the man froze, like something inside him had just been crushed. His face, sharp and rigid, cracked open for a split second. His eyes met Savannah's, confused, unguarded, and lost. The boy stepped back, hiding behind Savannah. "Dad, stop yelling." He looked at his son, then at her, then let out a slow breath. "I'm sorry." It landed like glass shattering on tile. "I'm Garrett Monroe. I lost my son." His voice caught. One hand ran through his rain-soaked hair. "The boy, his name is Oliver." Savannah stood still for a few seconds, then knelt and handed Oliver the napkin with the bear. "Hang it up in your room, kiddo." Garrett looked at her closely. "You a teacher?" She shook her head. "I'm an illustrator. Children's books." Then added with a half smile, "And no, I don't usually pick up random kids off the street." Garrett let out a small laugh, barely there, like he couldn't believe it came from him. He leaned down and pulled his son into a hug. Oliver nestled into his father's neck but still turned to Savannah and whispered, "You look like Mom. You've got curly hair too." She froze. Not at the words, but at Garrett's eyes right after. The look of a man who just saw something he thought was gone forever. "Thank you," he said, and this time his voice wasn't cold. "I owe you one." Savannah shrugged. "If it doesn't rain tomorrow, you're off the hook." She turned and walked toward the main entrance, where the wind still howled and the rain came down in sheets. Only when she was out of sight, away from Garrett's stunned face and Oliver's sad brown eyes, did she realize her heart was still pounding like a drum. Just a random encounter, a lost kid, a panicked dad, and one simple sentence, "She looks like Mom." That was all. At least, that's what Savannah told herself. 3 days later, Savannah's small studio door echoed with 3 firm knocks. She wasn't expecting anyone. In fact, for the past 3 days, she had deliberately avoided mentioning the mall incident. She hadn't told a soul. She hadn't drawn anything related to it. And most definitely, she hadn't let herself think about the tearful brown-eyed boy or the steel-faced father who looked like he was carved from ice. But when she opened the door, both those images were standing right in front of her. Garrett Monroe wore a dark brown trench coat, hair still damp from the misty drizzle outside, holding a folded umbrella in one hand. He didn't say hi, didn't make small talk. He just looked at her and said something so insane it barely sounded real. "I need you, for 10 days, to be my wife." Savannah burst out laughing. "I'm sorry, what?" "Just pretend," he said quickly. "No strings, no more than 10 days. "Hold on," she raised a hand. "Who exactly do you think you're talking to?" "I draw picture books. I'm not starring in a sitcom." Garrett didn't smile. "I know that. I also know you don't owe me a thing, but I don't have any other option." He stepped inside, eyes scanning the room filled with sketches, stacks of coloring books, and an unwashed coffee mug. "I asked the mall staff. They gave me the number for the coffee shop. I went back there. They pointed me here." Savannah crossed her arms. "Why me?" he exhaled. "Oliver's final psychological evaluation is next week. Child welfare wants to determine whether he's stable enough to stay with me. My ex-wife's family, they've always believed I'm unfit to raise him alone. They want custody." Savannah froze. Oliver told the doctor that his mom came back, that she reads him to sleep, draws bears for him, holds him when he panics. Her mouth parted, but no words came out. "And the only person he described is you." The air in the room seemed to thicken. Savannah blinked, trying to process it. "I've tried everything. Therapy, specialized schools, even emotional coaches. But no one has been able to make him believe he still has a family." Garrett paused. "Until he met you." Savannah took a step back. "No, I can't. This isn't something I should be involved in." "I'm not asking you to be his mother," Garrett said, voice lower now. "I'm begging you to help him believe he's still safe." She shook her head. "This is pretending. It's a lie. I can't fake being your wife in front of your family, your friends, your son, and a legal board. This isn't a game." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small photo. It was of Oliver, maybe 1 year old, sitting in the lap of a woman with brown hair, laughing, waving a stuffed bear. The woman's eyes looked tired, but filled with love. "My wife," Garrett said softly. "Her name was Elise. She had postpartum depression, but I didn't understand the signs fast enough. 3 years ago, a car accident. I couldn't save either of them, only Oliver." His voice caught, and since that day he hasn't truly slept. His voice dropped even lower. "But the night he met you, he slept 5 hours straight, no nightmares, no tears." Savannah swallowed hard. Something tightened in her throat. "The upcoming memorial is a big event. My entire family will be there. The board will be watching. All eyes will be on Oliver." Garrett looked at her again. "I don't need you to play the perfect wife. I just need you to be there, so he can feel like his mom's still close." Savannah turned away, fists clenched. Every part of her wanted to say no. This wasn't her world. This wasn't her responsibility. But then she saw him in her mind again. Oliver, sitting alone at the info desk, dinosaur backpack in his lap, whispering like a breeze, "You look like Mom." She turned back and met Garrett's eyes. 10 days, she said slowly. "Just 10. No more, no less." He nodded. "I promise." Savannah took a long breath. She knew stepping into this meant walking straight into something with no clear way out. But some pleas can't be ignored, and some children shouldn't have to wait too long to feel safe. Savannah couldn't remember the last time she'd seen a house this expensive and this lifeless. She rolled her suitcase down a gleaming stone hallway, lined with emotionless abstract art. Floor-to-ceiling windows opened onto a perfectly manicured backyard, every leaf in its place. Garrett's mansion looked more like a high-end showroom than a home where a child actually lived. He led her through the cold, spotless kitchen and stopped at a room at the far end of the first floor. "This is your room. The master's upstairs." Savannah glanced around. The room was fully prepped, crisp sheets, spotless white pillows, not a wrinkle in sight. But like everything else in the house, it didn't feel lived in. Didn't feel like it belonged to anyone. "Thanks," she said quietly, still gripping the suitcase handle like a lifeline. "Tonight's our first dinner with the evaluation board. But they won't ask anything intense, mostly just watching Oliver." "And what's my role in all this?" she asked dryly, unable to hide the edge in her voice. "The wife's back after a long trip," Garrett said calmly. "Loyal but private, not the type to share much. Trust me, these people don't dig unless they're forced to." Savannah didn't reply. She looked down at her left hand, where Garrett had just slid on a fake engagement ring. The stone wasn't huge, but it sparkled just enough to make the story believable, to make people believe the love was real. Then Oliver came bursting in, full speed like she belonged there. "Mom," she didn't even have time to react before his arms wrapped tightly around her waist. "Look what I made," he beamed, holding up a crayon drawing, 3 stick figures under a roof. Garrett, Savannah, and Oliver. A bright red apple tree stood beside them. She knelt down and smiled gently. "That's beautiful, Oliver. I told the doctor already. That mom came back. Don't leave again, okay?" Savannah's heart squeezed. She just nodded, forcing the smile to stay on her face. Dinner was held in the grand dining room, a crystal chandelier hanging above like a floating crown. The board consisted of 3 people, a middle-aged psychologist, a child welfare attorney, and an educational consultant. They ate light, watched closely, but didn't ask much. Oliver sat in the middle of the table, eating and excitedly narrating stories from his picture books. He kept glancing at Savannah like he needed her confirmation. Every time she nodded or smiled, he lit up even more. "He's glowing," the psychologist murmured after Oliver was taken upstairs to bed. "Nothing like the last sessions." Garrett nodded. Being back with family makes a clear difference. Savannah didn't say a word. She just stared down at her plate, the food long gone cold. When night fell, she returned to her room. A few minutes later, Garrett knocked. He didn't come in, just stood in the doorway. "Thank you for today," he said. "You did better than I could have hoped." "We've already started, haven't we?" she replied, then paused. "Do you always keep this much distance?" Garrett gave a slight shrug. "It's part of the deal. You don't have to worry. I won't cross any lines." She nodded, unsure why that left a small, unexpected ache in her chest. Near midnight, Savannah was woken by a soft knock. It was Oliver, in dinosaur pajamas, clutching a pillow. "I had a bad dream," he whispered. "Can I sleep with you?" She hesitated for a second, then lifted the blanket, motioning him in. Oliver curled up close, his small hand wrapping around hers. "You're still here, right?" "Yeah, I'm here," she whispered back, voice rough with emotion. He was asleep within minutes, breathing steady, his hand still clutching hers like he was afraid she might vanish. Savannah stared up at the ceiling, lying in the dark of her room so perfectly arranged it felt suffocating. She could feel it, clear as anything. The line between real and pretend was starting to blur. And she didn't know how much longer she could hold it together. The house at night was eerily quiet, only the wind brushing through the trees in the backyard and the subtle creak of wood shifting with the change in temperature. Savannah lay still, wide awake in her bed. She could still feel Oliver's small hand wrapped around her arm from the night before, his whisper of "Mom" echoing in her ears, less like a word and more like a reflex, something deep in his wiring that reached for safety. She didn't know what she was doing. All she knew was that with each passing day, the feelings were getting harder to fake, and the line between the role she was playing and who she really was fading, piece by piece. She got up and stepped into the hallway for a glass of water. The living room lights were off, but a faint glow spilled from the room at the far end of the house, the piano room. Garrett had only mentioned it once when she asked about the classical music that sometimes drifted faintly through the halls. Savannah walked closer, about to knock, then stopped. The sound of the piano floated out, soft but insistent, a symphony she didn't recognize, but each note hit like a question. Sad, regretful, quiet. Garrett sat upright at the piano, fingers gliding over the keys like a sleepwalker, completely unaware of anyone outside the door. The lighting inside was dim, just enough to outline his face, tense but at peace, like playing allowed him to exist without needing to explain himself. Savannah didn't go in. She just stood there, holding her breath. When the music ended, Garrett remained still. It was a long time before he whispered, barely audible to no one in particular. "If you were still alive, I would have never stopped." Savannah quietly turned back toward her room, fingers clenched around the cold glass of water. In that moment, she no longer saw Garrett as the cold, composed success story. She saw someone pouring everything he couldn't say into the keys of a piano. The next morning, as she passed the kitchen, she heard voices coming from the library behind it. She wasn't planning to eavesdrop, but stopped cold when she heard her name. "She's fine, not the type to stir up trouble," Garrett's voice. "Oliver trusts her. That's the only reason I agreed to go through with this crazy plan. You know, if this blows up, Elise's family will jump on it," another voice replied, calm, firm. "Probably his lawyer. They're just waiting for a mistake. They won't let it go." "I know," Garrett said quietly. "If I fail this time, I lose him." The words dropped inside Savannah like something heavy and final. That afternoon, while Oliver was at school, Garrett poured 2 cups of tea and invited her to sit in the backyard. The air was softer than usual, touched by the early shift of fall. The leaves had started turning a pale gold. "I heard you playing last night," she said plainly. "You're really good." Garrett didn't look surprised. He just sipped his tea, eyes fixed on the hedgeline. Music used to be my whole life, he said. Started lessons at 4. Performed everywhere before I turned 30. It was how I survived, controlling every note, every feeling. And then, she asked softly. Elise hated it, he said with a dry laugh. She said it made her feel like she'd never measure up. I never understood what she meant, until it was too late. Savannah stayed silent. Elise started showing signs of postpartum depression, Garrett said. But I thought it was just exhaustion. I didn't pay attention, didn't get her to a doctor in time. I was too busy on tour. When she died, I didn't even know what city I was in. He gripped his teacup tightly. I don't deserve forgiveness. I let Oliver lose his mother. And worse, I have no idea how to help my son believe he's still safe. You're doing it, Savannah said quietly. Little by little. Garrett looked at her. I'm not as cold as you think, he said. I just don't know how to love anyone anymore without being afraid of losing them. A soft breeze stirred a few leaves onto the table. Savannah didn't respond right away. She just looked at him, longer than she had allowed herself to before. Not to analyze him, not to judge, but to understand. Garrett wasn't cruel. He was a man trying to survive a grief he still believed was his fault. She didn't know how far this would go, but for the first time, one thing was clearer than anything else. Garrett needed healing too, just as much as Oliver. After that afternoon in the garden, after hearing him speak about Elise for the first time, the space between them shifted. No one named it. No one tried to explain it. But something began to change in a way only the people inside it could feel. Breakfasts were no longer silent. Oliver would retell his latest ridiculous dream, and Garrett, rather than offering his usual nod, would pretend to be shocked, grilling him on every absurd detail until all three of them were doubled over with laughter. Savannah was no longer a stranger in the house. She had become the one who read bedtime stories, the one who checked whether Oliver's toothbrush was wet or dry, the one who folded towels and sometimes rearranged the books on the shelf by color instead of size. Garrett no longer stood on the sidelines either. He'd sit on the floor, picking up stray Lego pieces, asking Oliver which part of the robot this one belonged to. Once, Savannah caught him taking a photo of a crayon drawing taped to the fridge, saving it like a real memory. A week passed faster than she expected. And suddenly everything started to feel less like a setup and more like a life. Maybe even a family. When Garrett invited her to his company's charity event, Savannah said yes without thinking twice. It was the annual gala, a fundraiser for education programs filled with investors, executives, and press. Garrett's look wasn't so much a question as it was a reminder. This wasn't just a night out. It mattered. Savannah wore a simple black gown, her hair pinned up with a few soft strands falling loose. Garrett, in a classic tuxedo, looked sharp down to every last crease. When he stepped forward and offered his hand, she didn't feel like a guest. She felt like this was something they'd done before, many times. The ballroom shimmered under warm lights, soft jazz floating through the air, white linen covering the tables, and wine glinting in crystal glasses. They entered like a real married couple. Garrett held her hand without hesitation, introduced her as his wife to everyone they met. Savannah, she makes children's books. We met at a small art show in New Haven. She was surprised to hear herself laugh, and even more surprised when she followed along with the backstory without missing a beat. Oliver, in his tiny gray suit, walked between them like a perfect mix of polished and playful, charming everyone who laid eyes on him. They took a family photo in front of the gala backdrop, three of them standing close, Oliver grinning from ear to ear, Savannah looking down at him with soft eyes, and Garrett facing the camera with a quiet, steady gaze that somehow felt warm. A photographer captured the moment. Within hours, the picture was circulating on the company's social media, shared as a glowing image of the founder's beautiful family. Late that night, when they returned home, Oliver was fast asleep in the car. Garrett carried him upstairs, tucked him into bed with careful hands, then came back down to find Savannah standing in the hallway, heels in her hand. "Thank you for today," he said, voice low and rough with exhaustion. "You made it all feel easier." "I'm just doing my part," she replied, though the small tilt of a smile at her lips said otherwise. Garrett looked at her for a few seconds longer. Then suddenly, barely louder than a breath, he said, "If this wasn't pretend, would you stay?" She froze. For a moment, everything inside her tilted, not because of the question, but because she wasn't sure she could answer it honestly. Savannah glanced down at her hand, where the fake ring still rested like a roll not yet wrapped. "Don't ask me that," she said softly, eyes avoiding his. "We're still in the 10 days, remember?" Garrett nodded, saying nothing more. He stepped back and opened her door, his gaze steady but retreating. "Good night, Savannah." She stepped inside, closed the door behind her, and stood there for a long time, her hand pressed to her chest like she was trying to remind her heart not to betray her head. The house was silent. Silent enough that it almost felt real. And that was the most dangerous part. The morning after the gala, Savannah's phone wouldn't stop buzzing, just as she poured her first cup of coffee. The screen lit up with messages from an old friend in the illustration world. "You're on the news. What's going on? When did you marry a millionaire?" She opened the link they'd sent. There it was, the photo from last night, the three of them bathed in golden light, looking every bit the picture-perfect family. And just below it, a headline stretched across half the screen, "The mystery wife of Garrett Monroe finally revealed?" She gasped. Sure, she knew the photo might be shared, but she hadn't expected the media to pick it up this fast, or this loud. Before she could say a word, Garrett walked into the kitchen. His phone, too, was ringing nonstop. He glanced at the screen, then looked at her. "They're coming in from everywhere. Legal, PR, and I think my mother." "I didn't think this would go this far," she said quietly. "We're in the spotlight now." "They won't let this go," Garrett said, eyes still locked on his screen. "We have to control the story before someone else does it for us." But they were already too late. Just hours later, a hastily released podcast episode dropped on a gossip-heavy tech channel, one known for digging into the personal lives of industry figures. The host interviewed someone claiming to be an old source close to Savannah Grant, an ex-boyfriend, a former co-worker from her design job years ago. "She knows how to use emotion to win people over," the man said, voice clear and smug. "Savannah once asked me to pretend to be an author so she could land her first illustration deal. She's good at acting, I'll give her that. So if she's faking a marriage to a millionaire now, honestly, I'm not surprised." His name was Blake Holden, a name Savannah thought she had erased from her life. The same man who tricked her into signing over the rights to her first published work. The one she'd cut off completely. It didn't stop there. A Reddit thread exploded overnight, complete with timelines, rental records, and cold facts. Savannah had never registered a marriage, had no paperwork proving cohabitation with Garrett, and, according to a lease filed just 10 days ago, had only recently moved into the area. The comments section blew up. Some called her a gold digger. Others claimed it was a calculated PR stunt, and one post, upvoted thousands of times, read, "The kid looks genuinely happy. It'd be heartbreaking if it's all just an act." Garrett sat at his desk in his home office, the screen glowing with headlines and noise. Savannah stood in the doorway, frozen. She hadn't dared step inside. After a long stretch of silence, she finally spoke. "Do you believe me?" Garrett looked up. "Why didn't you tell me about your past? About Blake?" "I didn't think it mattered," she said, her voice low but sharp with disbelief. "I never thought someone would dig through every page of my life just because of one photo. But you also didn't tell me you only just moved to this city, because I didn't think I was being investigated like a criminal." "This is my son," Garrett snapped. "His life could be affected because of you." The stairwell door swung open. Both of them turned. Oliver stood there, hair messy, eyes swollen like he'd been crying. "I heard," he whispered. "You're not really my mom. I knew it." "Oliver," Savannah rushed forward, but he stepped back. "You're fighting because of me, right? It's my fault." "No, it's not," Garrett said quickly, but Oliver had already turned and bolted upstairs. Savannah moved to follow, but Garrett held her back. "Let me." But minutes later, when they burst into Oliver's room, the door was wide open. So was the window. Oliver had climbed over the balcony and jumped onto the side roof, something he'd once proudly told Savannah he could do if he ever wanted to, escape doing homework. Garrett cursed and bolted out of the house. Savannah ran after him, heart hammering. They tore through the garden, shouting his name until their voices broke. A housekeeper said she'd seen a small figure slip past the back hedge. They jumped into the car and drove, no plan, no direction. Dread rising with every second. By the time they returned over an hour later, police cars were parked out front. A neighbor couple had found Oliver alone at a bus stop several blocks away, clutching his dinosaur backpack, crying uncontrollably. Savannah dropped to her knees the moment she saw him. "Oliver," he threw himself into her arms, sobbing. I thought you were gonna leave. Everyone leaves me." She held him tight. No defense. No explanation. Because for the first time, she didn't know if she was still pretending anymore. The rain came pouring down just minutes after they brought Oliver home from the bus stop. He still hadn't said a word. Just sat quietly in the back seat, clutching his dinosaur backpack and the crumpled drawing of the three of them under a roof. Savannah sat beside him, one hand gently resting on his back, but she didn't say much. She didn't know what words could possibly stitch together what had just torn apart. Once they got home, Garrett carried Oliver upstairs, changed him into dry clothes, and came back down to the kitchen, where Savannah stood, soaked and trembling, hair dripping onto the tile. They stared at each other, neither speaking. Then Garrett finally broke the silence, his voice raw from exhaustion and anger. "You should have told me about Blake, about your past, about everything." "You think I was hiding it on purpose?" Savannah snapped, her voice cracking into a near shout. "I didn't start this media circus. But you walked into my life, into my son's life, with a story full of missing pieces," Garrett shot back. "You didn't think that was going to blow up eventually?" "I didn't walk into your life. You pulled me in," she shouted, fists clenched. "You knocked on my door and begged me to help your son feel less alone." Garrett's jaw tightened. "And you did. You did more than anyone ever has. But this," he gestured toward the TV screens still glowing in the background, flooded with their photos and headlines. "This is the cost of pretending, and my son is the one paying for it." Savannah stepped back, her chest rising and falling. "Then let me fix it. I'll leave, tomorrow." She turned before the tears could fall, because if she stayed 1 second longer, she knew she wouldn't have the strength to go. The next morning the sky was still a dull gray, the rain reduced to a mist clinging to the windows. Savannah packed in silence. There wasn't much to take. Just a few outfits, a couple sketchbooks, and a heart cracked clean in half. She knocked gently on Oliver's door. He was sitting on the floor, quietly organizing his toys. When he saw her, he stood, eyes red but steady. He didn't flinch. "I know," Oliver said softly. "You're leaving." Savannah stepped closer, knelt down, and placed her hand gently on his shoulder. "Savannah," she whispered. "My real name is Savannah, and I'm not your mom." He pressed his lips together, eyes far too knowing for his age. "But I want you to be." "I want that too," she said, voice catching in her throat. "But I can't be the person who lets you down. I can't be another grown-up who says they'll stay and then disappears." Oliver threw his arms around her, holding tight. "You didn't let me down. You came, you stayed." She hugged him fiercely, kissed the top of his head, and whispered, "I'll remember you, every single day." She held him long, too long, because she didn't know how to let go. Garrett was waiting at the door. No coat, no umbrella, just standing there holding something wrapped in paper. "I don't have any perfect words to send you off," he said quietly. "I'm not expecting anything," she replied quietly. Garrett handed her the wrapped bundle. She opened it. Inside was the old napkin, the first drawing she'd ever made for Oliver at the mall, the little bear hugging an oversized donut. The ink had faded, but the bear's goofy grin was still there, stubborn and intact. "He kept it in his desk drawer," Garrett said. "Since day one." Savannah nodded, pressed the soft paper to her chest, then turned toward the gate. No one said goodbye. They didn't need to. When the iron gate closed behind her, silence fell over the house like a blanket. No more morning laughter, no more burnt pancake smell, no more bedtime stories echoing through the hallway. The 10 days were over. No one was pretending anymore. But nothing could go back to the way it was. 1 year was long enough for the media to move on, but not long enough for a child to forget someone. Or for a man to erase the memory of the one person who made him believe loss wasn't the only ending. Garrett Monroe used to think he was used to the quiet. The soundless hallways without little feet, the untouched kitchen table, and a schedule packed so tightly it left no room for reflection. But after Savannah left, the silence in that house changed. It wasn't just quiet anymore. It was heavy, like even the air had decided to leave him. He didn't say much to Oliver about it, but he noticed. The drawings stopped. No more families under rooftops. No more bears. No more requests for bedtime stories. And when someone asked, "You okay, buddy?" Oliver would just nod, instead of offering one of those full-hearted smiles that used to light up a room. Every night, Garrett could hear Oliver tossing and turning. Once, he walked past the boy's room and found him sitting on the bed, holding the crumpled napkin. The same one with the bear Savannah had drawn the day they met. The ink was faded, the paper nearly falling apart, but Oliver clutched it like it was something living. "I miss her," he whispered, eyes down. Garrett sat beside him, heart heavy. "So do I." As for Savannah, since the day she walked away from Garrett's house, she threw herself into work. She moved studios, took on more commissions than she needed, signed a deal with a small publisher to finish the book she had once dreamed of, a story about a lost boy and the gentle bear who helped guide him home. She never mentioned Oliver or Garrett in interviews, but every line she drew, every sentence she wrote, held pieces of them. It was the only way she knew how to keep them close without letting her heart break all over again. Then, one spring morning, as Savannah was clearing her desk preparing for the launch of her first book, a cream-colored envelope arrived. No sender, no note on the front. Inside was a drawing, crayon on paper, 3 figures standing beneath a big tree, hand in hand. Beneath them, scrawled in messy, earnest letters, "Mom, can you stay this time?" Savannah's hands trembled the moment she saw the lines, the style unmistakable. No name was needed. In the corner, a tiny smudge of green ink. She remembered it well, from the day she taught Oliver how to mix colors, how to find warmth in unexpected shades. Tucked behind the drawing was a folded card, simple, no decoration. Inside, just one line, neat, firm, and unmistakably his. "Come back if your heart still remembers this place." No signature, no explanation. But she didn't need one. She'd once read his heart through a single glance. Now, one line was all it took. That afternoon, Savannah didn't book a flight. She drove. With her in the passenger seat sat a chocolate cake, the one Oliver had once declared the best cake ever when she made it that first time. No one knew she was coming. She had no idea how she'd be received. But this time, she brought no pretending, just herself. When she arrived, the house was alive with color and sound. Laughter spilled out into the driveway. A small birthday party was underway in the backyard. Cake table, art station, kids chasing each other beneath the apple tree. Savannah stepped through the open gate, cake in hand, heart in her throat. Oliver was the first to see her. The boy froze for just a second, then dropped the crayon in his hand and sprinted toward her, nearly shouting, "Mom." Savannah dropped to her knees, arms wide, and caught him in a hug she'd been waiting an entire year to give. "I'm sorry I was gone so long," she whispered, and felt his small arms tighten around her like he wasn't letting go this time. When she looked up, Garrett was standing a few steps away. His eyes didn't ask questions. They didn't accuse. They just held a quiet depth, like he told himself 100 times this moment would never come, but had never stopped hoping it would. "This is the best cake in the world," she said, holding out the box. "I remember," he smiled. "Oliver still talks about it." They walked into the backyard together. No announcement. No big explanation, just 3 people falling back into place, like a missing part of a family had quietly come home. Savannah helped Oliver blow out the candles. They cut the cake, laughed, let the moment breathe, and as the party began to wind down, Garrett stepped beside her, leaned in close, and said just loud enough for her to hear, "This time, stay. This time, I don't need you to pretend to be my wife anymore." Savannah turned to him, eyes red, brimming. "I just need you to be yourself." And for the first time in a very long time, she wasn't afraid to stay. She didn't feel like she had to act. She just needed to be, in a place her heart had quietly belonged to all along. Some stories start with a lie, but not every lie is meant to deceive. Sometimes, it's the only way a wounded heart finds the courage to open again. And when the feelings become real, the hardest part isn't admitting them, it's having the strength to hold on. Have you ever pretended to feel something, only to realize you weren't pretending anymore? If this story stirred something in you, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next journey that hits just as deep. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. And thank you for staying with a story that meant something real.